we will kick off. It's a couple of minutes after 7, so we'll get things underway. Thanks everyone very much for joining us this evening. There's going to be 3 of us on the call tonight, taking you through everything you need to know about teaching in regional and rural Australia. So it's quite a specialised webinar, and we're really lucky to be joined by Charlene and Hannah, who are on the ground in Australia. So we've got sort of the experts with us. We are going to have a chat box running, and if you would like to ask questions along the way, you can pop them in the chat box for us, and we'll do our best to answer them for you that way. We are going to try and get this done. Oh, can everyone hear me? Someone's put no voice. Can you hear me? If you
Claire, but is anyone else able to hear?
Somebody can't hear me. Oh, yep.
Okay, so Rosalind can.
Yeah. You may need to check the volume on your computer, Mohammed. Everybody else can hear you. Can we hear more people? Yeah, so we'll attempt to have this over and done within about 45 minutes. So we will crank on and introduce ourselves. So my name is Claire, and I'm coming to you from Auckland, New Zealand. I'm on the ground here, and my role is supporting New Zealand-based educators. I also do support other international geographies, making the move into Australia as well as the UK. And we'll talk to you a little bit about who we are as a company shortly. I used to be a primary teacher, and I have taught in New Zealand and also in the UK. And ever since I came back from London, I've been in this role supporting educators travelling since. So I'll pass over to Charlene.
Hi everyone, I'm Charlene. Everyone calls me Char. I am based in Australia, and I look after and I support schools in regional and rural New South Wales. My background is I was born in Ireland. I moved when I was very young to the UK, and I grew up in London. And I became a recruitment consultant over in the UK for many years, specialising in education recruitment. When I moved with my husband, who is a teacher, who is Australian, we moved to Sydney, and we spent many years in Sydney. And since being in Australia, up until last year when I returned to recruitment, I have always worked in schools. And I've worked in both Sydney and in regional New South Wales. So it really helps when I'm looking after and speaking to people looking to move to regional New South Wales, because I feel like I've done that move myself. I know how big it is, and I've worked both inside the schools and now helping them with their recruitment needs. And I'll pass over to Hannah.
Thanks, Shar. Evening, everyone. My name's Hannah. Much like Shar, I'm in a very similar role, but in the state of Victoria, which oversees sort of Melbourne as a city and then regional Victoria alongside that. So as part of my role, I help educators transitioning into roles within sort of city of Melbourne and those regional areas as well as sort of assisting schools looking for those educators transitioning in as well. I'm from a very similar background to Claire there. I originally grew up in Auckland in New Zealand and made the move over here to Melbourne almost a couple of years ago now, during which I've been with ANZ UK the whole time, and come from a background of an ex-primary teacher and early years teacher as well for about 10 years before sort of heading into recruitment. And that's me. So I'll hand back to you, Claire.
Thanks, ladies. Just before we move on, I know we do have quite a global representation on the webinar, so it would be great if you wouldn't mind just popping in the chat where you're tuning in from, just so we know who we are speaking to. I'll just get back to Mohammed on this too. Yeah, just which country you're coming to us from. I think we've got, quite a few South African educators, and we should have some Kiwis on the call as well. Right.
Yeah.
Way,
yeah. Exactly, Janet.
All right, so we've got a bit of a mix, so we'll try and cater for for what you'll need to know on that. Is this me? Or is this,
Yeah.
who did we decide? So just a little bit about who we are as a company. It's in New Zealand anyway, we don't have a lot of education recruitment agencies. It's not a common way to secure a role. We are a global organisation. We have 21 offices around the world. So we've got 5 offices in the UK. We've got 9 or maybe 10 now offices across Australia. We've got representation in Canada, Copenhagen, across the US. So we are, our goal is to support you wherever you go, and often it's a 360 degree. So you might come from New Zealand, head to Australia and teach there for a couple of years, and then look to move on to teach in the UK, and then we can help you come back home as well. So we've been around for over 20 years. In Australia, we've got over 200 consultants on the ground. So there's very real support and a very strong network there for you. So we're really well established. When you work with an agency, it's a free service for teachers. So there's no obligations to you. We are just trying to support you in finding a position. So when you're registering with us, you're just giving us the opportunity to support you in that way. Shah, I think we had you down for this one.
Yeah. So making the transition to Australia, we are very aware that this is a very big move. Like I said, I've done this move myself. So people will be in all different stages of doing a transition. Some people might be coming over just to do it for 12 months and have an experience of living and teaching in Australia. Other people might be looking to come over here and settle down. But regardless, we're here to find out what you're looking for, and we're here to help you make that transition as easy as it can possibly be, because we know it's big. If you're from New Zealand, this is a bit easier for you. If you're a New Zealand passport holder, you will get immediate permanent residency. Any other overseas educator, you are going to require a visa. There's all different types of visas. So you've got work and holiday visas, the permanent residency visas, the 189 or the 190. And we do also at times have sponsorship opportunities. We may touch on this a little bit more later on in the presentation, but they are definitely not a huge number of schools at the minute that are offering sponsorship, but we do work with schools that offer sponsorship. We would just like to, stress that we are not migration agents. We are not specialists in visas, and that we really, really recommend that you do get in touch with a migration agent. I think if you actually go to the next slide, Claire. Yes. There is going to be details for a migration agent that you can contact. So we do have a number of South Africans on the webinar this evening. If you're from South Africa, we do we say consult with a MARA accredited visa agent. For our South Africans, we actually recommend Marlene Prentice. She's from South Africa. She works for the Migration Network Australia. You will be able to see the QR code on the screen, so feel free to scan that. But she does help South African teachers move or give the correct advice in what visas for them to get to make that move to Australia. And obviously as well, as I said, we're not specialists in visas, but if you are going to go down a permanent residency visa route, then you're going to have to need things like AITSL, which basically AITSL is going to make sure that you are qualified to, or are going to get accredited to teach in Australia. So AITSL is going to make sure that you have a 4-year equivalent degree, whether that be an undergraduate degree and then a PGCE or a straight 4-year education degree. And you also need to have a minimum of 45 hours supervised teacher placement. So unfortunately, if you do have under 45 hours, you won't get accredited and passed to teach in Australia. And then we also have for some countries, not all, and this is why we recommend the migration agents. We do have some countries that will be required, and South Africa is one of them, to get their IELTS, so their English language test. And there is minimum pass rates for that. So in speaking and listening, you need to get a minimum score of 8. And in reading and writing, you need to get a minimum score of 7.
In regards to qualifications, they will be covered if you're by ATSL, I can't say that, but if you're from New Zealand, then our qualifications will cross over. They do have a 4-year degree for primary or secondary. So if you have a 3-year bachelor's in New Zealand, then you'll need to use the Trans-Tasman Mutual Recognition Agreement to make sure that you can teach in Australia. That is a mutual recognition. So if you're provisionally registered in New Zealand, then you'll be provisionally registered in the relevant state in Australia. Obviously, the Australian curriculum will be different from New Zealand or South Africa or wherever you're coming from, but there are a lot of crossovers, particularly with the New Zealand curriculum. Each state has their own curriculum, but generally they are all exam-based rather than our NCEA method that we use. So yeah, transition in terms of qualifications is relatively straightforward, especially if you're from New Zealand.
Okay, so locations across New South Wales. So obviously, as I said, I look after regional New South Wales. We do have consultants in our Sydney office. I look after permanent roles and contract roles. I don't really work very much or at all within casual work, but I work with independent and Catholic primary and secondary schools. So a good thing about moving to a regional space is early exposure to leadership roles. The regions really do offer really good opportunities for you to progress in your career. So if you are looking to come over to Australia and make a life here and settle here, and career progression is important to you, I'm currently working with a number of schools who are offering. And to be honest, it can take a little bit of time, because if you're an international teacher and you haven't taught, for example, a New South Wales curriculum, you may not get them head of department roles immediately. But there is opportunities definitely within a year or two with some of our regional schools where that growth can definitely happen. And I think it's important to understand when we talk about regional and rural areas, I myself look after anything basically an hour and a half to 2 hours outside of Sydney, and it will go all the way to the border of Queensland. So New South Wales is a very large state. So we cover a lot of ground and a lot of schools, but they're very different areas. So you may go to, for example, I moved to Tamworth. It's about a 5-hour drive from Sydney in regional New South Wales, and it's a really, really large regional city. It's got a population of probably just over 65,000 people. It's got, you know, a beautiful, beautiful cafes, beautiful sporting grounds. It's got an airport, so you can easily fly to Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney. So we have those types of towns and a number of those. And then we have your smaller towns, your more rural country towns, so agricultural farming towns. And I've got one of my schools on the border of Queensland. We have got 2 New Zealand teachers just placed there in permanent roles, and that's a town with less than 1,000 people. So really, really small areas. So we go from anything from those really large cities, which are just like smaller versions of Sydney, to those really small country towns. And then community events. We go into this a little bit more later in the presentation, but you know, we do host regular community events before and after to support our teachers. Also in areas where we have placed a number of teachers, like for example, I just said there's a little rural town on the border of Queensland, but still in New South Wales, and I have just placed another New Zealand permanent teacher there. So we do a lot in terms of trying to put those teachers in contact with each other. And also where we have a large, network of South African teachers that we've placed in an area, we will do things where we will have like a picnic day or things like that, so you can get to meet other educators in that area, so you don't feel so isolated when you come to make the move to another country. But in terms of community events just in regional areas outside of ANZ UK, there's always something going on. I was quite surprised when I moved to country areas how much they do in country areas. You've always got like food festivals. There's always got a rugby game on. There's lots of things that happen in these areas that bring the community together. And another point is accommodation provided and relocation incentives in some areas. Now, we do have a part in this presentation where we discuss incentives like this. But I think it is just important to understand at this point that this is individually for particular schools. So when we start to speak to you about opportunities that will give you incentives, they will be one-on-one conversations, and we will tell you individually, these schools are offering these types of incentives up front, because every school is different. I just want to make it, I guess, for you to understand that if you're coming to a regional area, it doesn't automatically mean you are going to get an incentive. So registering in New South Wales. So New South Wales Education Standards Authority, NESA, we call it NESA. That's basically our accreditation body. So they will let you know that you can teach. They will give you a paperwork that you're going to be able to be accredited to teach in New South Wales. Unfortunately, with New South Wales, it can only be done on arrival. So if you're in South Africa, I believe it's basically your version of SACE, which I believe is national, whereas as Claire pointed out earlier, in Australia, each state has their own registration body or accreditation body. So in New South Wales, we have NESA. Some will allow you to do it in other states prior to arrival, but New South Wales won't. And that's because of the Working with Children check. So if you get a position in New South Wales or you decide to move to New South Wales to teach, you have to go into a Service New South Wales centre. And that Service New South Wales centre, you can only go in person, and you have to show certain points, like 100 points of ID, and you can apply for that Working with Children check on the spot in person. Now, it says 1 to 5 days and it's $80. Typically, I have seen them come back pretty quickly, usually within 48 hours, you'll get a Working with Children check back, but just to be safe, they do say 1 to 5 days. Then this is why you can't really apply for NESA or do NESA until you're in Australia or in New South Wales, because to apply for NESA, you need a Working with Children check. And then obviously you need to be in person to do the Working with Children check. But once you do receive that, and it is typically quite quickly, you will be able to apply for online for NESA. So NESA takes anything from 2 to 4 weeks, and it's $100 a year that you have to pay to stay accredited with NESA. Now, for New Zealand, you do have, as Claire pointed out before, that mutual recognition. So if you're fully accredited to teach in New Zealand, you'll get full accreditation and be proficient, they call it, to teach in New South Wales. If you're from other countries, you'll be provisionally accredited. What that basically means is, because you haven't yet ticked off all of the Australian standards, which obviously you wouldn't be able to because you're not here to teach in this country, they put you as provisionally accredited, but you are given time to get proficient. And normally, all of the schools that I work with will have a mentor that will be able to help you. They'll do observations and they'll be able to help you collate evidence, so you can get fully proficient through NESA. And some schools give a timeline of 12 months and some schools don't give quite the same timeline. But if you're an experienced teacher, it's just going to be a matter of getting some support and a mentor within your school and submitting the correct paperwork. The next part is you can interview and secure a job without NESA. I think this is really important for you to know, because 90% of the placements that I have are with international teachers that are offshore. So please understand, you don't need to have NESA and a working with children check. The schools that I support are more than happy to do online interviews. And if you are successful from that interview, they are able to make an offer. And normally they will actually give you a letter of offer, and it is just subject to you getting NESA when you arrive. The most important part, though, is allowing yourself, if you do have a job lined up, and we will support with that process, but is allowing yourself enough time to come to Australia, give yourself that necessary time to make sure that NESA is approved within that 30 days, because you're not going to be able to go into a classroom and teach without NESA. And we will support around them state registration. So we do have lists of documentation that you're going to need, depending on which state that you go to. So prior to you leaving, we'll be able to tell you all the paperwork that you must bring with you to ensure that it all goes nice and smoothly for you.
All right, my time to shine here for Victoria, hey? So much like how Shah ran through New South Wales there, you can see down on the little map there, the Victoria as a state is a much smaller area. So we're not covering quite as much landmass within the countries. We do still have the tiers, much like Shah discussed, where you will have metropolitan roles that we're sort of supporting schools with, and then regional roles, and then all the way through to more rural roles. So that can look anything from, like, we are supporting schools that might be 45 minutes from, central Melbourne, right through to, 3-4 hours outside of central Melbourne as well. Now, these roles, we're looking at permanent roles as well as contract roles as well. They're in both primary and secondary schools. The schools that we support range from independent schools with no faith affiliation through to Catholic schools, Christian schools, and a handful of smaller other faith-based schools as well across that continuum there too. Now, Shah also mentioned their leadership and executive roles. Being part of a smaller community is a really great career path toward those roles. Given you are working with generally a smaller school within these communities as well, there's sort of great room for growth and development when you're working amongst those schools, if that's sort of an aspiration of yours to head in that direction outside of your classroom teaching as well. Now, we are working with the Department of Education very excitedly. We're waiting for the final sign-off on some incentives for some government schools. So we're hoping in the next month or two that we'll get sort of official word on what that looks like. And the hope is that there's some incentive that sits behind those roles as well, particularly for overseas-based educators. So, for all of you in New Zealand and South Africa and various other places, that also might be really handy for you to know further down the track in the next couple of months. Important to note, so in Melbourne, we do have 4 offices throughout Melbourne, and anyone that's overly familiar, we've got one on St Kilda Road, right in sort of very close to the city there. We've got one in Collingwood, one in Geelong, and then one in Notting Hill. So we do have really good coverage of the area of Victoria, and we'll often be sort of heading out to those regional Victorian schools for visits and things as well throughout the year as well. And Shah touched on this a little bit, and like she says, we'll go into a bit more depth further down the track, but we have those educator events there, and their whole design is to support you through the process. Like we've said many times, we know it's a massive move, uprooting yourself and relocating to a completely different country. So they're there to sort of help you network, to help you get in touch with educators that are going through similar experiences as you sort of settle in and through your career as well. And I've touched on this one down the bottom here. We're certainly a smaller state, so we certainly don't have quite as much area to travel to when we're heading out to our regional schools, unlike Shah.
I can send you for hours.
All right, now registering is a little bit simpler than New South Wales in that you are actually able to register before you get into the country. So I guess that's sort of one perk there. They do say that they like you to be within about a 6-week window of when you are going to touch down in Australia, when you're sending your registration information off. Either that or to have a secure job offer that you're able to evidence for them as well. Now, much like NESA in New South Wales, our accreditation body for Victoria is called the Victorian Institute of Teaching, and is often referred to as VIT and your VIT registration that you're going to be granted. I've mentioned it can be done before Australia. It does say 2 to 6 weeks on the website. Now, that ebbs and flows throughout the year depending on how busy they are. We've had people that have got it through in a week. We've had people that have taken sort of 6 weeks. It tends to be as you get to the end of the year and there's a lot of new graduates or people registering for the new academic year, that timeline can increase a little bit as you're entering those sort of latter months of the year there. But generally throughout the rest of the year, you tend to get it under your 6-week mark. And like it says there, $167 to get that one across as well. Trans-Tasman mutual recognition, for those of you that are lucky enough to be coming over from New Zealand, we've touched on that being a little bit of a easier pathway for you, where they're recognising your experience being very similar to that of Australia, and therefore giving you a slightly easier pathway to have your New Zealand teacher registration recognised and then swapped over to whether it be VIT over here or NESA as well. And same goes for state registrations there. They can go through that mutual recognition pathway as well through to get VIT if that's something that you hold as well. Okay, perfect. So the types of opportunities that we are supporting, we touched on it a little bit there. So they are both permanent or contract opportunities. So some you will have permanent ongoing roles, others are contracts, and that can vary from anything from a term-long contract through to a semester contract as well. Sometimes you'll also get 12-month contracts thrown in there too. So there is a variety depending on what you're after and your circumstance when you're coming over. Now, some really great things with sort of setting up in these schools longer term as opposed to doing relief work as well is that, you're finding that home in your new work there. You're having that consistency of where you're going to. You know sort of where you're heading each day. You get to know the team that you're working in, and you have some really great support in doing that as well, which is really handy when you're setting yourself up in a new country, in a curriculum that might be all new for you as well. We all know, being educators, that consistency within the classroom is also one of those things that really helps with behaviour and belonging and all of those sorts of things as well. So that's also an added bonus that you've got there too. And we've talked a little bit about the career development there as well. You're able to sort of implement all of your own systems and whatnot within the classroom once you're sort of going to that place consistently and for a longer period as well. Digital interviews, we've popped down there too, and Shah touched on this a little bit as well. Most of the schools these days, given the digital world that we live in, are quite open-minded to digital interviews as well. For sponsorship, it can be a little bit trickier to secure via an online interview. But for the most part, sort of educators, particularly in the regional and rural areas, are aware that they're going to have educators coming in from whether it be another state or another country. So they're pretty well adjusted at interviewing online now. So there should be no troubles there. All right, preparation. So this is the exciting part where we're sort of getting to look at jobs and get things in motion for you. So part of the service that we provide for you falls CV preparation. So as we're sort of getting to that point where we're starting to talk about looking at jobs and schools and areas and getting that CV ready, we can help with that process. So you are welcome to send your CV over to us and we can give you feedback on that. We can help with some of the formatting, and we can provide provide exemplars and things for you to sort of base the information that you're popping into your CV as well. So you don't sort of feel like you have to do that on your own there as well. Part of what we'll do too, as we're sort of sending applications over to schools, is we'll write summaries for you where we can essentially, that's a really great avenue for us to advocate as best we can for you, and give a bit of background on your teaching journey and sort of where you see yourself going forward too. So that's all something that we can help you along the way with. And if we're sort of lucky enough to get to that stage of locking in an interview, interview preparation is also something that we can help with. So within that, we've got a heap of interview preparation resources that we can send you, that you can have a flick through on your side and do a bit of preparing for. But we can also offer you what we call an interview preparation session, which is essentially where you can meet with your consultant online, and get your head in that interview zone. So a chance to go through some of those really common education-based themes that we know that they're going to ask about in most school interviews. And the hope is you sort of walk out the other side feeling a bit more prepared, your head's in that zone, but you've also got a basket of examples that you've sort of talked about there that you can utilize to cover some of those themes that they're going to ask for as well. All right, on to the next one.
Okay. So I can start talking about teacher salaries, so the good stuff. So we are very lucky in Australia. We do have really, really good rates of pay. Our teachers are paid really well over here. And just recently, only towards the end of last year, New South Wales itself went and did an 8% pay rise for teachers, which has been fantastic and well deserved. Now, our New South Wales teachers, for a graduate or a first year out teacher, it's 85,000 Australian dollars per annum, and 7 years or plus full-time experience is 122,100. In Victoria, it is a graduate at 78,000. But 8 years or more full-time experience is 132,000 Australian dollars. Now that is your salary. You also get super, which at the moment I believe is 11.5% super on top of that salary. So that's just been a recent increase as well. So pay rates over here are very, very good. And if you move over here, you can quite easily, especially in those regional areas, have a really good a good balance, a good cost of living.
Yeah, that superannuation is amazing. In New Zealand, the standard is 3% input from the government or employer, and 3% from your salary goes into the super. So yeah, that's much more favourable system.
I wasn't aware of that. Yeah. So yeah, it is. It's really good. And this is the part where we just discuss incentives. Just to touch on the salary as well. This might be a bit too much detail at this point, but majority of our schools, not all, but a lot of our schools are happy to pay our experienced teacher at the level of their experience. We would just need to get things like statements of service that would be able to prove, and they'd have to be written in certain criteria, and that would be dependent on the school that you're going for. But for most of the schools, it would be how many years you've been working, if that was part-time or full-time, what position that you did hold at that school, and if you'd had any leave without pay. And then that way we can try to get you paid based on your experience, even regardless of the fact that you're new to teaching in Australia. And now to touch on incentives. So as I said, this is very individual to schools, but we do have some schools we are very lucky to work with that can offer furnished accommodation, rental subsidies. So some offer accommodation, some offer a subsidy towards that, which is normally paid in. Over here, you get paid every fortnight. So some of our schools will offer to pay a percentage, or they might just give you money each fortnight into your salary to subsidize that rent. We also have other financial incentives such as relocation costs. So sometimes they can give you a certain amount of money to help with those relocation costs, because we all know that that's very expensive. And then there can be bonuses and incentive payments. And I have worked with schools that are up to 50,000 Australian dollars in some areas worth of incentives. Now, Again, just to let you know, if you are going to a large regional, like when my husband and I went to Tamworth, we worked in a school there, that's a large regional area. Areas like that, especially since COVID, have had a number of people leaving areas in cities where they wanted to be in a more countryside area. They got a lot more value for their money. And in these large cities, it's basically like a city on a smaller scale. So they have a lot of people go into and move into these areas, and they don't need to offer those large incentives. So you will find that a number of the incentives that are offered, they're really offered for those outback communities, or they're really rural places. So depending on what you're individually looking for, there is people that would really like to, just get out there and go into the outback and get that experience of a real, rural community. And there is obviously a lot of incentive to be able to save up quite a lot of money working in those areas with the incentives. And that $50,000, that those types of incentives are more retention. So in your first year, you may get 10,000, and in your second year in that community, you get another 15,000. Or so those incentives are accumulated normally up to about 5 years worth of being in that area. And another incentive is visa sponsorship. So this really does look different across the board of our schools that do sponsor. Some schools will have that license to sponsor. It's not so easy for a school to be able to sponsor. They can't just decide that they really like a particular teacher, so they're going to sponsor them. There is legal processes that have to go through to be allowed to do that. So with our schools that can sponsor, some of them may sponsor you, but expect you to pay the cost of the visa. And other schools that I work with, that's their incentive. They will cover the cost of that visa. So that's another incentive for you as well, is some of our schools will help with those costs of those visas. And I did touch on this a minute ago, but cost of living. I mean, it was, to be honest with you, one of the main reasons that I moved to regional New South Wales. I had planned to do it for 12 months and I ended up staying there, 8 years, and I'm still in a regional community now, and I couldn't imagine going back to the big cities. But cost of living, I mean, it doesn't matter where you work as a teacher. If you're a teacher in a particular state, you're going to get the same pay at the level of experience that you have. So if you are living in a city, you may be paying, say, for example, in Bondi or St. Kilda, $450 to $500 a week. And that's for a room in a share house. Whereas if you're in a regional city, like I was, you could pay $450 to $500 a week for a 3-4 bedroom house. And then in a really small rural town, you could be paying $200 to $350 a week for a 2-3 bedroom house. But remember, in some of the rural areas as well, there is rental subsidies as an incentive too. So your cost of living, I mean, you just go into those regional areas. As I said, you're going to get the same salary as a teacher, but you're going to have a lot more disposable income. So you can have the money to travel Australia and have the money to go to the coast and the beaches. And I might touch on this one as it's one of my schools, but we did want to do in this webinar session what we've called our hot jobs. And they're basically jobs that we're working on at the minute. And one of them that I'm working on is in Outback, New South Wales. I have a really good relationship with this diocese. It's a really large diocese. And we have placed teachers there this year and last year. They are currently looking for a Year 5 teacher, and they are looking for somebody to start as soon as possible. So basically terms 3 and 4 in New South Wales, that's on the 22nd of July start. Obviously, we're pushing it quite fine now to that date. So I'm sure for the right person and that online interview going well, they'd be happy to push that back a couple of weeks, but ideally the sooner the better. And this school, being in Outback New South Wales, does come with significant incentives. So if you are in this webinar and you are at a stage where you have the ability to move to Australia quite quickly, then we're definitely keen on having a chat to you about the schools.
Is it a couple more?
And then the other school that I'm working with, this is a school that actually does offer sponsorship opportunities. And we have just recently placed 3 teachers that have been sponsored. This is an independent Catholic school. It's quite a prestigious school. It's very academic, and it's very into it's a big sporting school, basically. Rugby league, very big into rugby league. And it's got fantastic facilities at this school. So they're in Forbes, New South Wales, which is it's a really picturesque little country town. And its biggest regional city is probably Dubbo, which has probably got about 45,000 people. It's a little bit smaller to Tamworth, but it would be fairly similar. And you're about 90 minutes from Forbes to Dubbo. But Forbes itself would have everything that you need in it. It's not tiny. It would have all of the amenities that you'd need day to day. They are looking for a maths teacher to start as soon as possible. We may have potentially found somebody for this position. They do offer sponsorship as well. However, it hasn't closed completely yet, but there is 2 opportunities for maths teachers as well, and they're already looking for 2025. So they are looking for maths, but they did contact me today and let me know that they are actually opening up all of their stage 5 offerings. So across the board for 2025, they are looking for new teachers in all core subject areas.
One more, Shah.
Okay, so science teachers. Regional New South Wales. So we have quite a number of schools across regional New South Wales looking for science teachers. They do offer relocation incentives as well, and these are mainly for January 2025 starts. Some of them could be a potential of term 4, but yes, these are in larger regional towns or larger regional cities, or very close to. But we're always on the lookout for science teachers.
Okay, over to Victoria. So just a couple here, and these are really just in here to give you a taster of some of the different variety that you can sort of get. I think both that we've popped in here are for ASAP start. So as soon as they can sort of get someone in there, the better for these guys. This particular school here is an Anglican primary school. It's actually a brand new school that's just opened this year, and offers up to year 8. And with each subsequent year, they're going to increase the year levels that they're offering within this school. So it's based in a town called Shepparton, which is about 2-ish hours out of central Melbourne, so not too far out there. And I believe if we go to the next one, we will have now this is a year 7 to 10 maths teacher. Now Werribee is actually not too far from central Melbourne. Werribee is actually only 45 minutes from Melbourne, but is still sort of classed as a regional area that we're servicing there. So you can see that there's a lot of variation in terms of locations where we're looking and sort of being able to cater that to your needs and what you're after there. Again, this one, they're looking for someone to start as soon as they can get someone in there. And this one is a permanent role that we've got there as well. All right, community and events. So we've sort of alluded to this as we've come through the webinar on a few occasions here. So part of our service is to try and build a community. So not only are we trying to help you place you into these new roles and find your fit work-wise, the hope is that we also have a wraparound service that can help you settle into, you know, whether it be a new country or a new school as well, and find a community for yourself. So that support is made up of a variety of things that we've got on offer here. One of those being their pre-departure events. So particularly New Zealand side, there are pre-departure events that are held there to help you sort of make connections while you're there. We've also got things like we've got a Facebook group for educators based in regional Victoria. So again, another avenue to be aware of new jobs that are coming up, to connect with other educators that have moved to similar parts of Victoria for you as well. There's another Facebook group, particularly for educators in general moving to Australia as well. And this one's really helpful if you've got any questions. And again, to connect with those like-minded people that are going through similar experiences to you. Some of the other things we've got too, we've implemented a regional jobs newsletter. So if you do want to be in the know with anything coming up, whether it be for now or future, you can sign up to that one. And we send that out every month to highlight about 10 or 15 new jobs that are floating around in various different areas across various different teaching levels and also teaching subjects as well. And the big one, which we all love, are the welcome events and the networking events. So we have them across various avenues. We have some where it's sort of based with casual relief teachers. We have some where they're based for contract and permanent teachers as well. And it's just a time for us all to come together to make those connections and create that community where we feel we can support each other as well.
Cool. And we will send a follow-up email out in the next couple of days with a recording of this, but we'll put the links on to join those Facebook groups in that email as well. Okay, so to wind it up, what to do from here. So if you are thinking, yes, right, I want to get over there and teach in Dubbo or Shepparton, then the first step is to have a chat with one of us. If you're in New Zealand, you can reach out to me and we'll have a discussion, and then I'll connect you to the most relevant person in Australia. If you're from another geography, as I said, you will get a follow-up email from us, so you can reach out to any one of us, and whoever's in the easiest time zone can connect with you from there. So first step is to have a chat. And then you'll likely be speaking to Shar or Hannah.
Yeah, you'll then get a contact from us. So you'll get a contact from Australia. So your Aussie consultant will call you, and we'll continue to stay in touch leading up to your departure to chat about roles and positions. We will tend to do online meetings, so very similar to this, but one-on-one, where we can talk about you and your individual, wants and what you're hoping for within your move. And then I'll be able to tell you as well what positions we have that I think might be suitable and what areas that they are in. So I think I may have already jumped to that, but following your meeting, your local consultant will start sourcing roles for you.
All right, jumped ahead.
So we will start sourcing those roles for you, and we'll do everything that Hannah had mentioned prior. We will help with your interview preparation. We'll let you know as much information about the school as possible, the people that will be on the panel to do your interview with you. And then from there, you want to go with this one, Hannah?
Yeah, sure thing. So once you've gone through that interview process, generally speaking, the school will come back to us and give us feedback on how you've gone. Hopefully all going well, they then proceed to an offer of the role, which it can either be communicated via us or via the school calling you directly. So once we sort of get to that stage of having that offer over the line, and hopefully you're really pleased in accepting that as well, that's where we will then support you from, if needed, from a registration perspective, if you haven't got that under your belt just yet. So again, we've talked a little bit about this as well, ensuring that we're supporting you in all that paperwork that you need, because there can be a fair amount involved in that sort of side of things as well, and any other support that you should need in that period as well. We've done this many times before, so usually if you ask any questions, we've usually got an answer or can send you in the right direction for one as well. And then I'll move on to the next one there once you get started in the classroom. So we try not to sort of disappear at that stage. So our hope is that we sort of still stay in touch there and kind of give you any support as you go through the motions of getting up and running. We do have lots of resources in terms of professional development that you're able to access through us as well. So that's also where we can sort of come into play once you're up and running and in that classroom as well.
Well, we have rolled on to the finish. We've done pretty much closely within our time. So thank everyone for joining us. And as we said, we will have that follow-up. You will get a recording of this. It may not come out until Monday. It does take a day or two to get converted to be able to be sent out. We will have all of our contact details on that email, as well as a lot of the links that we've discussed tonight. If you'd like to jump off now, that's as we said, thanks for joining us. We will stick around very briefly if you do have any general questions that are relevant to the whole group. If you've got any visa questions, we're not really in a position to answer those. And as we said, we divert you to an immigration expert for any visa questions. But if you've got a general question that as we said, is relevant to everyone, then it will be useful for you to jump on and either jump on the chat and ask it, or we might just have a quick flip through the chat as well to see if there's anything that we didn't get to.
I actually did just see, I was about to answer on the chat a couple of questions,
cool.
but I think it might just be easier to speak about them. So one of the questions was, what is rural Australia like to live in? In South Africa, rural is a challenge. That's not necessarily the case at all in Australia. Rural areas are not just known to be challenging. Of course, I want to be honest, there is going to be more challenging areas than others. There will be more challenge in school than others, but typically the majority of the schools that we work with are independent and private schools. And for myself in regional New South Wales, typically when I talk about rural areas, they're just farming communities, they're agricultural farmers. And so it's not at all that they're challenging communities to be in. It's just that agriculture is such a huge part of Australia. We have a number of towns like this, but typically the schools are really good schools and the communities are really good communities. So we can go individually when we're speaking to you about the types of places that might be suitable for you. But of course, your own family members, if you're traveling with children, if you're traveling with a partner, we've got to make sure that there's something in these areas for all of you, because there's no point to you having a position but your partner can't find work, or your children can't get into good schools or into good daycare. So that's why it's really important that we speak to you one-on-one and find out your whole see your whole picture and see who you're moving over here with. And we will be able to say which areas will be suitable for you and which perhaps won't be a good fit and won't align very well. When is your massive recruitment starting for next year? So with this, I would say typically for me, and it may be different for you, Hannah, but for me, for 2025, in Australia, teachers can give 4 weeks notice. So really, right up into December, most of my schools will finish on the 20th of December for the year, and the beginning of the academic year is about the 31st of January, typically for most of my schools that I work with. So if you, as a teacher, you're only required, you could really in December hand in your resignation, and then schools will come and let us know. However, we do start to get some positions that will pop up. Like now, I said, I've got one independent school that are already doing a recruitment drive for 2025. And a lot of my schools will probably start. We're heading into term 2 school holidays now, but around mid-term 3, so probably August, September, we'll start getting told about positions. You understand that they're going to be a lot more focused on term 4 positions, mid-term 3, if they have those in their schools and they need those. They need teachers for those. They are obviously going to be more pressing, but they will start to know at the end of the year if people have in mind that they're going to retire, or if people might be going off on maternity leave, or have just given them a heads up that they might be moving to a different area. So typically we might start hearing from about August, September, but it can go right up until December. Does anyone else have any questions they'd like to ask? No? Well, hopefully that means that you feel like we've covered everything as much as we can.
One one last one. Okay, we'll do one more and then we'll are there any extra requirements for top of the scale salaries?
No,
No. There are other options to have extra responsibilities.
to get
aren't there? You can
paid
move
more,
into be a
yes.
lead teacher or
Yeah, you can be a lead teacher or a highly distinguished teacher, or go on to head of department responsibilities and leadership roles. And then that would come with, if you got that promotion, that can come with extra pay. But in terms of if you are right, say you've been teaching for 10 years full time, all that time, and you have statements of service from all of your schools to show that you have been employed as a teacher full time for that amount of time, then you should get paid at the top of the pay scale for the state that you're in. Is that similar in Victoria, Hannah?
Yeah, exactly the same. Yeah, just based off your years of experience, same sort of expectations until you reach that positions of responsibility where you're sort of opting in to take on those things, and that comes with additional pay at that stage.
Brilliant.
Well, thank you, Hannah and Shah, for joining us from your side. And as I said, we will follow up with the recording and all of our contact details, and we look forward to keeping in touch from you and hopefully supporting you in your journey.